There's Ann.
I'm going to call to order this Lacey City Council meeting on March 26th, 2020. We're going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
of the United
of the
States of
United States of
America,
America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
That was a little different.
Can we see if we can mute everyone who's not present? First of all, this is obviously a new format for this Lacey City Council. We have several council members who are here remotely, and so I'm going to take roll call. Deputy Mayor Pratt,
Hang on. Here.
Councilmember Cox,
Present.
Councilmember Stedman,
Present.
Councilmember Greenstein,
Here.
Councilmember Miller. Here. Councilmember Kunkel. Present. And I'm obviously present as well. We have one amendment to the agenda under Section 12, Thurston County United Way request, and that will be to Scott. And just to let the public know, we are going to be suspending the boards, commissions, and committee reports later. That will be explained under a resolution later in the agenda. So next up is public comments on items not on the agenda. Have we received any public comments? Seeing none, then let's go straight to the resolutions. The first resolution.
You want an approval of the agenda, though?
Oh, yes, sorry. Can I get, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Yeah, move to approve the amended agenda and consent agenda?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Mike was raising his hand.
And that's an aye from Councilmember Stedman, Deputy Mayor Pratt, and Councilmember Cox. So the ayes have it. We have an amended agenda.
He's still raising his hand.
So Councilmember Stedman, do you have a question?
I just, thank you, Mayor. I just had a request that for the next agenda item, because we have so many business owners on the council, if possibly a motion could come from one of them. It doesn't matter if it's me or you or whoever.
For the business, we'll get to that business support program right now. That's under resolutions. And I'm going to turn that over to Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe Rick Walk's going to give that
Okay.
presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Yes, before you, the first resolution before you tonight, or this afternoon, is a recommendation to approve a resolution establishing the Lacey Small Business Stabilization Fund in response to the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. And this is a proposal, as we all are aware, with the COVID-19 pandemic effect, and the measures that need to be taken with social distancing, closure of businesses, those type of efforts, has to have a very large impact on our communities, not only our citizens, our employees, but also our small businesses, because one of the things in terms of slowdown in business, it wasn't a slowdown to be able to prepare for it, it was an immediate shut off of business activity, and it's created some significant impacts to those entities, a small business that create a foundation for employment, services, and revenue for cities to provide essential services to the overall community for the general public benefit. So the proposal is for the council to consider establishing this business stabilization fund, a small business stabilization fund, out of funds that are currently within the city's strategic investment fund. And this is a fund that's just set aside by the council for for certain circumstances that they felt that could help be a strategic investment in the local economy and those economic efforts. And this is one way that those funds could be spent. The resolution will talk about allocating $1 million of that fund towards economic recovery efforts and $500,000 to start this stabilization fund for small businesses. And again, this is an effort to soften the impacts, if you will, as we approach on an economic recovery effort that's both in a short term and a long term. And in the long term, any type of disaster response, which this is similar to, is we want to try to start establishing what those long-term recovery strategies, putting those infrastructure and things in place so over time that the economy can fully recover. And the short term is somewhat in the triage effort and trying to figure out how we match resources, create resources, and get them to those that are in need. And as we look through what's happening at the federal level with the federal stimulus package, at the state level, they're reinforcing the employment security systems. There is an aspect of our community that doesn't quite qualify for some of those funds, or if they do, those funds will be several weeks off before they become available, and they may be in the form of loans, which then again is another challenge for our small businesses. So this is an effort to try to provide a mechanism so the business can have some stability, try to keep their doors open long enough so they can get those other aids and relief packages and be able to survive through this so that they are a place for people to come back to employment once that is able to happen. So how this proposed fund would be set up would be, it'd be in partnership with the Thurston Economic Development Council's Center for Business Innovation. They would be the administrators of this fund. There will be basic criteria that we would want to have that would weigh against any applications for the fund. That criteria includes that the business must have a current business license with the City of Lacey prior to March 1st. They must have a physical location in the City of Lacey prior to March 1st. They must have no more than 5 full-time equivalent employees. Engage in business activities that would be eligible for U.S. Small Business Administration financing. The grants cannot be made to businesses owned or partially owned by managers, officers, directors of the EDC or the City of Lacey. The business must have experienced the loss of income due to COVID-19, and they must be able to demonstrate with that they were profitable prior to the disruption caused by COVID-19. And then based on the information submitted through the economic injury worksheet, which is a standardized form for disaster relief, that they may receive grants not to exceed $10,000. And it may be used to leverage funding from other public or private financing so long as the total funding does not exceed the amount of the economic injury worksheet. And so for somebody to access this grant opportunity, this fund opportunity, they would need to make application with the Thurston EDC Center for Business Innovation, submit the proper paperwork. They would evaluate that, and then based on their need and qualifications, potentially award up to $10,000 per business. So again, this is an effort to fill a gap. It's a short-term effort. I mentioned we also are putting together information and resources for aid and benefit to employees that are now out of work, households that need services, as well as other type forms of support for business in of itself. So this is one piece of a multi-pronged approach on the short-term triage. And with that, I'd be happy to respond to any questions the council may have.
The one concern I have is the 5 or fewer employees. Where'd you come up with that number? I mean, I understand we want to direct this to those who may not have the resources to immediately go out and do some of these other, apply for some of these other grants or SBA loans. But 5 is a very small amount. I would think that any restaurant in town would have at least, maybe 10 employees, and it's the restaurant industry that's really been hit one of the hardest here. And so 5 just seems like such a small number. Can you tell me where you got that from?
It's a number that, part of it is modeled off of the the City of Seattle program that became aware of a couple of weeks ago. That was a starting point. And I think they were actually lower than that, if I recall. And part of it is we don't know the full need that's out there. And two, we had to pick a number at some point, and we want to make sure we had the resources to help as many as possible. And so we basically just identified 5, knowing that we'd have to change the program or be flexible and nimble to increase it based on the information we get coming into the application forms or what is the actual need out there. So that is something, it was not based on anything other than a starting point.
So I've got a couple of
So
things. One, first, I'd like to see us raise that number right off the bat because we're doing this for brick and mortar businesses in the city. Very few brick and mortar businesses have 5 or less employees because you just can't operate the amount of hours that you're open with 5 employees typically. Certainly restaurants, having owned a restaurant, even a very small restaurant, cannot operate with 5 employees. I mean, very, very few restaurants would qualify under that. So I'd like to see us start with a higher number. 10 probably is a more reasonable number. I have a question also, though, on the actual resolution, number section 4. Can you go into that a little bit? So we're putting the initial, we're using $1 million. We're putting the initial 500 up in the fund, and the second 500,000. Is there some intention for using that in some different way, that we're using it at discretion of the city manager and not making it part of this fund from the beginning?
It's tied to having some flexibility because conditions are changing rapidly. And for instance, when we started talking about putting this fund together, at that point was the Friday before the required shutdown. It was just social distance that time. So things have evolved quite substantially since then. And so as we look at the short term, and if we see if this is an effective tool or not, you could use that extra $500,000 held in reserve to help supplement this grant program or assess and use that as a point to, well, are there other effective needs or out there in the community that we may be able to utilize those funds for. So it's just an element of creating some flexibility for it. Being strategic.
Will that come back to us before that second $500,000 is allocated?
In the realm of being nimble, we propose it to be at the discretion of the city manager, but then also with that would be reporting back to council, so council's informed of how those funds are being utilized.
So,
So I have my hand up.
I'm sorry.
Sure, sorry. Yeah, let's just go around. Wait, do you have any other questions?
Well, I have some more. I mean, I'm not okay with section 4.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, what's your question?
Yes, so my question is, how is the EDC going to get the word out to some of these businesses? I know you're talking about restaurants, but I'm talking about alteration shops, nail salons, this kind of thing, where there may be 5 or less people, but they are probably don't keep in touch with the EDC or the small business organization, those kinds of things, because they may speak a very broken English if they speak it at all, and they would benefit from this. But I mean, I could go around and hand it to people I know, but is the EDC going to send out postcards, or what are they going to do or are we, or what, to let them know about it?
We're going to create a coordinated blast of an outreach and communication. So right now, the EDC is already getting many phone calls a day from businesses that looking for assistance, looking for help, that would be probably merit this type of grant program. They also have received inquiries from folks that have heard about this conversation and wondering when it's going to be available. So there is already information out there, and they're already having contacts. In addition to that, we will be looking at a coordinated press release. We're going to be looking at getting information out through not only our websites and our email exchanges, but also through the chambers, the EDC's mailing list. And we're also going to have all the information that speaks to this program translated in not only Spanish, but other Vietnamese and other languages that are representative in our community. And we actually created a connection with somebody at the Department of Commerce who has the ability to create those translations for us, and they are working on that right now.
Okay.
But that will be on their website, which they may not access, correct?
Right, but we're also, as community economic development staff is right now making phone calls, contacting businesses, finding out how they're doing, making sure that they're aware, and so we're creating a contact sheet so that we can get that information out and that information flowing.
Okay.
Great. Councilmember Miller, do you have any questions?
I think Councilmember Kunkel
Okay,
had something.
Councilmember Kunkel?
No, Councilmember Greenstein expressed my concerns and yours as well. I do think the number of employees that we've designated that could be receiving these funds is too low. You know, at least 10 or more, I would agree with both the mayor and.
Could you speak in the mic?
Yeah, he was just reaffirming that the amount of employees at 5 is too low, Deputy Mayor, in his opinion. And so that was his main concern. Councilmember Stedman, do you have any questions?
So
Yep, you're on.
there's something that popped up on my screen, but it's working pretty well so far. My concerns is, well, a lot of my concerns are gone because the city manager has discretion and we can be informed later. But I do agree the number needs to be a little bit higher because the companies I have in mind that could benefit from this the most are the Charlie Safaris, the Ricardos, the nail shops, the ice cream shops. They're coming into their busy time of the years too, and they're already slow getting out of the gate with this all happening. So we want it to be as most effective as possible.
So,
Thank you.
I'm ready to make a motion if.
No, not quite yet. Councilmember Cox?
Really have any questions? I guess I would generally support raising it to 10 if that's what the will of the council is. And I do feel like, though, we have the ability to screen out larger businesses that may not actually need the help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the economic impact form is, I'm not sure if the council has seen it, but it's pretty straightforward. And it's also pretty simple. It basically shows you, what was your income, a year ago this month, and what's your income this month, and has some pretty basic parameters there that shows you if you've been affected by the virus. But we know in a lot of these businesses in town who are struggling. I mean, there's no doubt about the restaurant industry struggling, the nail salons, the hair places. I need a haircut, and we know they're struggling. So there's a lot of places that I believe need this help as soon as possible. But I do agree that the second 500,000, I would like that to come back before the council. Not that I don't trust you.
okay. And the whole thought about the discretion element was in certain parameters. It's always about being nimble, but if it is something that's not tied to maybe this grant program, we do bring it back. Because there are other aspects going on that there may be an opportunity that would arise, and we can definitely.
And if that opportunity comes up, I'm happy to have an emergency meeting and get on it as soon as possible.
And in terms of the employees, if at 10, at 25, it's one of those elements where we just really don't know what that demand is and how much those funds can go to help the most amount of businesses. And so if you do make a motion to change the number, to increase that number, I would just ask that you include that it's full-time equivalent, because
Yes.
a lot of times there's maybe 10 full-time equivalent, but there's 15 employees or part-time that create the equivalent. So that's one piece we want to point out.
Yeah, and that is a big issue on a lot of the help that's coming out now. You don't know if it's 50 employees or 50 full-time equivalent employees, and there's a huge difference between those two, for sure.
Yes.
City manager?
So maybe just, I appreciate the support and confidence in your city manager too. Just maybe to clarify too, we could put language, because again, we're trying to provide some flexibility because we don't know what we don't know. So maybe say priority will be giving to whatever number you feel good about, and that gives you a little bit more flexibility. So if someone has 18 employees or 26 employees, it doesn't mean that precludes them. It just means we're trying to focus on the smaller businesses.
Yep.
Is that,
I like that idea very much, but how would you like it worded for a motion that's going to make that work? Also, how do we change, so both the mayor and myself, and I don't know about others, but on that section 4, If the additional 500 winds up going to this same program, I don't necessarily feel like that needs to come back to council. But if that second 500 was going to be used in any other way, I'd like to have an opportunity to weigh in on that before it was
Okay.
done.
That's exactly how I feel. Council? Councilmember Stedman?
Can we, right now, as a majority, come up with a number or put an exclusion in there for restaurants? Maybe restaurants should be up to 50.
Yeah,
Because they
I
have
think, I really like the
wait-
I like the language that's been used, that we prefer it, a 10 full-time equivalent,
But not to exceed.
but not, yeah.
So you can make a motion to the effect that preference will be small businesses of 10 full-time equivalent employees or less, but not exceed 25.
Yeah, I think I'm.
So
for that.
moved.
Yeah. Councilmember Kunkel?
So I would not discourage people from inquiring if they don't exactly meet the initial criteria. I do think that we should consider all options. If there's a place of business that has more than 25 individuals and it would make a huge difference for them to have some kind of assistance, then we should know about it. And if we can make that, if we can accommodate that issue, then we should.
And there is some reconsideration elements in this, so if they don't quite meet the match, they can have some more conversation about it. The other part of it too is there may be a potential, and this is where that nimbleness, we can make some rules up, or not make rules, that's poor choice of words, but there's language in there that allows us to adjust the application forms to address issues that we may not be seeing. And there also could be that if it's 3 or 4 weeks before federal aid comes, but they need that 3 or 4 weeks of coverage and there's potential for money to come back to make that fund whole, there's another option there too.
Exactly, because we've also talked about having financial institutions contribute to that fund, which could, hopefully, give more people. Do we have an update on the financial institutions or anyone else looking to contribute to this fund to help our small businesses?
We have reached out and made some initial inquiries, and they are running it up their respective decision chains. And then also, we've been also focused on getting everything ready for this to launch, so that once it goes, then we'll be also contacting some of our community members to be able to help coordinate those asks from those financial institutions to contribute to it. The other part of it was, as this process goes, because this is something we're going to want to learn from, that there is a requirement that the Center for Business Innovation provides a weekly report of the activity that's going on. So we'll have, instead of waiting for a month, we'll be seeing information come in so we can be nimble and change direction if we need to.
I see
Got some
the
hands up.
Deputy Mayor. I see your hand.
Yes, what I don't want us to forget, though, is those businesses that'll totally go under, as opposed to just they need to be supported, but they aren't going to go under. I worry about that. And then secondly, there is some members of the business community that are taking it upon themselves to help other businesses. For instance, Clue Jewelers is doing that, and they're gathering a number of businesses, including Ricardo's, et cetera, that are joining to help fund their businesses as well as, or charities, whichever they want, the business wants to do. So be in mind, it's not just us only standing by ourselves.
I think what's really important with this fund in particular is that we can get the money out to those in need as soon as possible. I mean,
Yes.
Most businesses are operating on such small margins that all it takes is 2 weeks, and it's the difference between you're surviving or you're not surviving. I know this. I know a lot of the members on this council understand that as well. And so I hope expediency is a big part of this. As soon as we're having, we know that applications have already come into the EDC. I'm sure they're ready to go. They're just waiting for the funding to come, and I hope that funding can get out to them as soon as possible. What I'm really interested in is hearing the new language for the motion based on this conversation. But before we do that, Councilmember Stedman?
One last.
Yes.
Okay, one last thing. So I like our approach to focusing on the smallest of the small businesses first. That's awesome. The EDC does have a donate button on Facebook for small business and innovation. And there was a third thing that I'm drawing a blank on now. So it'll just have to
Okay.
wait till later.
So do you have a motion that we can,
Well, I guess I want to clarify what council's,
I know what it is.
okay,
prior to the motion, I'd like to clarify what council's intent is here. Looking specifically to what the mayor and other council members have addressed in section 4, the last sentence, I would just propose having it amended to read, "or other economic recovery measures as may be deemed appropriate by the city council." So that would,
the council.
by doing that, it would allow the additional 500,000 to supplement the fund, and no further action would be necessary. Or if city council wanted to direct them somewhere else, city council would have to take action to do that.
Perfect.
Love
Okay,
that.
so that would be one of the amendments. So the motion could be, we're not done yet, but when the motion comes, it'll be to adopt the resolution as amended, and I'll include those amendments in the
Oh.
resolution.
Okay.
So
As
the
amended,
second,
yeah.
the second discussion point that we talked about was not with regard to the resolution itself, but with regard to the exhibit attached thereto, particularly section 2, which currently reads, as proposed, the business, as a condition, the business has 5 full-time equivalent employees or fewer. And I guess I'd like to clarify, or council should clarify what they want that condition to state. We can come to an agreement on what that condition is, and then council can take a
I
motion.
think what we're looking for is more flexibility there for starters. Certainly with a higher number, and if there's a way to do it with flexibility rather than a firm number, I would prefer that. I'm just not sure.
Is there, I heard
How we do
25,
that.
is that a cap? Would that be a maximum number?
I would like to, put some parameters in that, because you're right, a larger business who may have easier access to loans and everything else.
Where
is-
10,000 may not be a difference maker.
It's not a difference for them. I'm sure it'd be nice, but what we're trying to do is keep businesses,
Yeah.
alive during this time. So,
We also have to consider it's a finite supply of money.
yes, absolutely.
$1 million is not a lot of money to try to contend with.
Yeah.
I can't
And-
hear.
Yeah,
So,
What I stated was $1 million is not a lot of money.
At a maximum
That's going to
tax
make a huge impact for businesses. It might help put a Band-Aid on the wound temporarily, but it's not going to cause any long-term financial resolution.
so Rick, do you have
Businesses we're talking about.
some language here?
Well, I mentioned some language before, and I'll mention it again, but I also just want a word of caution, because the conversation is good. Having a cap is helpful, because, again, if you have up to a $10,000 grant, where that most need can be effective.
Mm-hmm.
And usually in your smaller businesses, they're the ones that may not have that cash flow stream that, when it gets interrupted, as the mayor said, creates a significant challenge. Also, they may not be in a position to be able to take on additional debt. So those are the type of things that we're really structuring, and maybe we set that 5 number too
So,
low.
I
But
would-
if you could do something of 10, not to exceed, but preference. The other piece of it you got to think about is, as grants come in, we're not going to have a granting period and sort them out and rank them. This is going to be, somebody comes in, they qualify, they're out, and it's going to be somewhat of a first come, first serve. And as Councilmember Kunkelman, you're going to have a finite supply of cash to be able to provide assistance. So those are part of the factors you would consider. So with language for to change that, if you can know where you want to be in that number of full-time equivalent employees, and then I can kind of look at the language.
I guess I would suggest the 10 and capped at 25 full-time employees.
So can we do it with 2 numbers, basically? So in other words, our goal is to help those businesses 10 and under, but
The cap
a
at,
cap at 25. Because again, there's going to be nail
What-
salons and stuff that may have more than 10 people that work at different times. that
Right.
kind of
So I
thing.
have suggested edit.
Can
So
I have
for-
a question?
Let's hear from the city attorney, and then I'll go around
Okay,
and
so
take
the
questions.
suggested edit to Section 2, under criteria of Exhibit A, would be, the condition would be that the business has 25 full-time equivalent employees or fewer. That's the condition. Second sentence, though, would be, however, priority will be given to businesses with 10 FTEs or fewer.
I'm good with that.
We're good with that language?
Very
Deputy Mayor?
I just, yeah, I'm probably good with that. The issue is, as long as it's screened by the EDC so that, because you're right, it'll be first come, first serve. And those that know about it easily can use up the money faster. So I think that's okay as long as they use some pretty good discretion.
Yes.
I share the deputy mayor's concern on that because I do think that although, we all know who the EDC is, I'm not sure that our our very, especially when you get into the really small, the 5, 6, 10 employee businesses, I'd be willing to bet most of them don't even know the EDC exists. When you're talking about
Exactly.
small restaurants, nail salons, hairdressers, those people don't deal with the business community. They just run their own little business.
Yeah.
So I am concerned with how we get the word out to them because I think it's critical because I think they're the businesses that are going to be in the most need and have the least knowledge. They're not chamber members necessarily. They're not involved. They just run their business. They go to work every day, It is a
Exactly.
concern.
So we're saying that persons or businesses that pay out 400 hours of payroll per week are eligible for this. Is that correct? Because we're talking about 10 full-time employees.
Or less.
Or less.
Yeah.
So how do they prove that they're, what are we asking for? How do we condition that?
That's a good question. How's the EDC confirm how many employees they have, Rick?
As part of that injury, disaster injury worksheet, and then also they will have profit and loss statements as well as tax return, potentially tax return information as well to document what they have for employees, what they had for financial impact, what they had before the impacts occurred, and what they're currently operating at.
Okay.
I would add one more thing.
Okay.
An alternative would be for that section to have the condition be the business has 10, 15, a smaller number, full-time equivalent employees or fewer. So that's your condition. And then your clause can be, however, consideration will be given to businesses with more employees if funds are available.
That might be reasonable.
So that would, the first condition would be 10 or fewer, but we'd make considerations for businesses who have over 10 employees if funds are available. That's,
What was wrong
with the
wording we had
that-
first time around from you? Because I really like that.
Well, nothing was wrong with the wording. However, council raised some concerns about the funds being
I'll get you
used up
Stedman.
right away by the bigger businesses that might.
Yep. Councilmember Stedman? I just like to see
I
you
was
raise
gonna
your hand.
suggest that we're considering the $500,000 later possibly. Maybe that could be earmarked for the bigger businesses like restaurants and nail salons and such. So that's a suggestion.
Well, I'm really curious to see how quickly we get through this first, say, 50 businesses. I mean,
I would,
if within 2 weeks we've gone through, or, and hopefully that happens, to tell you the truth. I'd rather see all this go out in this next week. And then we're back here in another week saying, yes, go, let's keep it going or whatever, because time is so important.
Mayor?
Yes?
My concern is that businesses might lay off people to hit that golden number. And so that'd be a concern. We'd rather have them keep extra employees and instead of limit them or laying off extra employees to hit that
Yeah,
low
Councilor Conklin?
number.
So going back to the application process, that would be very difficult to do. If they're looking at their profit and loss, if they're looking at their practice for the last few months, that would be hard to do, to just lay people off and justify being in that window of opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, not for $10,000.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would just add, I don't think a $10,000 is enough incentive for people to start laying people off to get under the number. I mean, if you have more employees than that, the 10,000 isn't going to be that dramatic a number that it's going to make you take that kind of action.
And those are almost two different things, is how employees compared to profit and loss. We're talking about is profit and loss, not
Yeah.
how many employees. So it's almost two different things. Deputy Mayor?
They probably already, if they're desperate, they've already laid off people.
Yes.
And the unemployment is skyrocketing, so that isn't a
3.3
problem.
million last month.
So one last,
Well, I was just
City
going to say, I
Manager?
think the language the city attorney came up with first probably meets most of the intent of council. I think
so, too.
you put a 25 employee, basically count on it, but then your first priority is going to be any businesses that are 10 or fewer. So you're getting through that sort of volume of businesses before you then start considering 25 or more.
so
More than
I would
10.
make a motion that we approve this COVID-19 Small Business Stabilization Fund with a grant criteria and procedures as amended by our city attorney.
Second.
And seconded. Discussion. Any discussion?
I have some comments.
Attorney?
So one of the concerns I've had with this resolution, with this proposal, is the constitutional prohibition on the gift of public funds. The Constitution says right out of the gate that jurisdictions, the state, cities, counties, aren't to gift money, nor are they to lend their credit. That's what the Constitution says. The Supreme Court and the Washington State courts have interpreted the Constitution as they do, and they've indicated that there's actually a two-pronged test to whether or not a gift of public funds has occurred. And the first question is whether or not the expenditure was to further a fundamental purpose of government. And if the expenditure furthers a fundamental purpose of government, then that's it. The inquisition ends, the inquiry ends, and it's deemed not to be a gift.
Okay.
However, if it isn't furthering a fundamental purpose, then you go into whether there was donative intent, whether there was consideration, et cetera. So this action, absent an emergency, if the council were just to give grants to businesses, that would be a problem.
Yep.
And I would advise against it. I would warn council of the nature of the Constitution gifting prohibition, and I would advise against it. However, having reviewed this and having discussed this with colleagues and having reviewed some case law, I've come to the conclusion that the COVID emergency is causing an economic downturn that's out of everybody's control. It's unexpected. I mean, it's an emergent crisis, and it's the government's, it's a purpose of government to try to assist the public in any way it can. And in a situation where small businesses are starving and going under, the revitalization of that economy is going to have benefits to far more than any of these businesses. I mean, council's not even looking at any particular business. It's the landscape in general that the council's considering for this grant program. So that's a long-winded way of saying that there are issues with the Constitution prohibition against the gift of public funds. It could be argued that it is a violation of that. I don't think it is. I think it's warranted given these circumstances. But I want, before council makes a motion or has any further discussion, to have that in their minds.
So, question with that. So, based on what you've just said, you would think that obviously anyone can sue. Anyone can decide to bring, to say that what we did was wrong and sue us for it. You think we have a fair argument, though, and a decent place to argue from?
More than decent.
Okay.
Yes.
I think so, too.
I'd probably be shaking a little bit if I thought we were like on that thin of ice. I do think we have a very solid argument.
Okay.
That it's a good action, it's a supported action, and it's not a violation. Okay. There are arguments on the other side, is I guess what I want to raise.
Thank you for bringing it up.
So
I'm willing to take
just
that.
before you said consideration, which I don't believe there is any consideration here, so we're not exchanging anything. Just before you said consideration, you said something else. It was a two-pronged test. The second one was
A donative intent.
donative. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Whether council's strictly wanting to donate. For example, there's a case whereby, it's a recent case where where a council purchased a piece of property. And the council purchased the property for, I think it was a little less than 100,000. It was for a pocket park. It was like 90,000 or so. The appraisal came in at like 40,000. So the question was, well, why did you pay 90 for something that's valued at 40? There was arguments raised that the council knew who owned it and that the owner was going to lose money. They had purchased it for like 100. And so the argument was that, well, the council's donating that extra money just to make their friend
This one person.
okay. That would be an example. Well, actually, it's not an example because for other reasons, it was found not to be a gift. So were the council simply to hand money to somebody.
That's actually a bad example.
But I mean, I
think we get what you mean,
Councilmember
though.
Miller, consideration in the contract sense doesn't have to be, money for a thing, for a tangible item. I mean, businesses are going to be able to stay open. They're going to be able to provide services to the public.
Well, I
mean-
understood the consideration portion. I just didn't understand donative intent.
Oh,
So
okay, yeah,
that's-
but to the extent that there may not be consideration, I would argue that there is consideration. Even if you did get to that, that there would be consideration in council's action here. Council, the city is getting something
Right.
for this.
We're getting businesses to stay open, therefore people can go to the business and they can continue operating and they can continue paying their city taxes. Right. Is that the consideration you're talking about in this particular case?
Could be an example of it.
That is the one question I have is how's the EDC describing this money? Is the business going to owe taxes on this $10,000?
It's a grant, not a loan.
It's a grant. It's a
So
I know that's a accounting
is
question.
is this money going to be considered part of their revenue stream or their income that, when the time comes, like, are they going to get a 1098 from us? I'm sorry, a
Won't be from
1099
us.
from us?
It won't be from
IRS
us. It'll be
question.
Or
them.
from the EDC?
That's not a question I am prepared to answer.
Okay. That's something
IRS
that's been
question.
that's in the back of my mind, because it's the $10,000 is the threshold. If you give more than $10,000, you have to claim it, but $10,000 or less, it's considered a gift. So, but is it a gift? I don't know. It's a grant. Yeah, it's a grant, so that's why I'm trying to
I
figure
have
that.
one quick
Okay.
question. This question is really for, do you know if any of the other jurisdictions are considering anything like this? And the reason I ask is I've been approached by several businesses that are actually in our UGA, which, so they're not in the city limits, they're in the UGA, and I'm just,
There has been discussions about the program that we have developed. To my knowledge, the other jurisdictions are not pursuing this type of approach. They are looking at making sure that they can contribute funds to employees that are being laid off, those type of things. And that's one of the challenges too, is trying to work in coordination regionally, but there are some, differences.
Sure.
And with city funds, we construe this to be for city businesses with physical locations in the city. And just at a point of clarification, I just double checked the Seattle program. That's where a lot of this criteria came from in terms of 5 employees and
Yeah.
$10,000. But
Yeah, I forwarded Rick that as soon as the mayor announced that they're doing a small business loan. I was like, look at what Seattle's doing. We need to do
this is a
something
great,
just like it.
I
so.
think this is a
So
great idea.
is there any other discussion? If not, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. So
Mr.
Deputy,
Mayor,
yes?
this is Councilmember Cox. I just have one question for our attorney, and that is, is there any legal remedy in this that would allow us, if there were some deception, if funds were, given out that shouldn't have been given out, for us to recover them from that business? I'm not saying that will happen, but I would just feel better knowing that there was some
some
sort of redress if something untoward did happen.
I would be surprised if there weren't. I mean, there'd be issues as to whether or not the EDC would seek that or whether the city would. And obviously, if the EDC is going to have an agreement with, I don't know who to look at. I guess I'll look over here.
it's a lot easier.
The EDC would have potentially through their process would have an ability to seek reimbursement of those funds. And then, of course, we're going to enter into an agreement with the EDC, and we would be able to seek redress from the EDC. So without specifics, it's hard to answer your question, Councilmember Cox, but yes, there will be some avenue to go down if there's fraud or something.
I think maybe a 4506 would work. It allows, us to get a copy of their transcripts from the IRS. So that's one method that we use in the mortgage industry to confirm that, this matches that, something along those lines.
And then also too, with all their application submittals, they have to validate that their information is accurate. And then if they receive funds, they'll be signing a document for receipt of funds too. So there's that connection or acknowledgement that they're portraying accurate information. So that legal remedy would be in place.
Great. So I'm going to do a roll call vote on this. It's been moved and seconded to adopt this resolution establishing the Lacey Small Business Stabilization Fund in response to the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Deputy Mayor?
Yay.
Councilmember Stedman?
Yay.
Councilmember Cox?
Yep.
Yay.
Councilmember Greenstein?
Yay.
Councilmember Miller?
Yes.
Councilmember Kunkel?
Yay.
And I'm a yay as well, so that passes unanimously. The motion passes. Thank you. Next up, under resolutions, is a resolution to provide temporary procedures in response to COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So we have a second resolution before you today, and this also deals with the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all well versed in. We understand it's an emergency that's affecting not only our city, but the whole world for that matter. And there's been some restrictions put in place by the governor that have had a negative economic impact. I mean, necessary restrictions for the social distancing in our health, but are having an impact on the economy and on our citizens and on the way we do business, frankly, here at the city. And so what we're proposing here are some changes to city policy and to the city code on a temporary basis that would survive through this emergency only and then would terminate at the end of that emergency. So I'll walk you through very briefly what these changes are. First and foremost, to the city council procedures. We talked about this briefly at our work session last week. We are suggesting to remove any rule. The resolution would remove any rule that would prohibit telephonic meetings. Currently, Robert's rules, and we follow Robert's rules, and they indicate that there has to be separate action taken to meet telephonically. Well, this resolution would just wipe away with that. We can meet telephonically or remotely if we want to. We're suggesting streamlining the agenda to discourage the public from attending and to make the meetings quicker. And we went through this at length last week, and I heard loud and clear the council's direction that they were very concerned about the public not being able to attend. So this isn't your city attorney trying to sneak something in. This is just with new information subsequent to that. The public's, frankly, they're not even allowed to come at this time. The doors are locked. So I think having our agenda square with what's currently going on, to not give any misrepresentations about what council might be willing to hear or whatnot. So quickly, we'd be removing public recognitions and presentations. We'd be removing public comment. We would still, of course, council or the public's always welcome to submit written comment or telephone comment or what have you. We'd be removing proclamations, and then, of course, we'd be removing boards, commissions, and committee reports. The resolution also would change the meeting time, which is contained in the Lacey Municipal Code, from 7 p.m. to 4 p.m. The resolution would cancel work sessions. The governor's order, basically, we wouldn't be able to meet for work sessions anyway. So this is, again, just squaring with the rules that are out there. With regards to utility billing, the resolution will suspend imposition of any interest or late penalty to any accounts that might become delinquent. It would also suspend any enforcement action against any delinquent utility account. Our code currently authorizes the city to disconnect water if there's like a delinquent account after some period of notice and whatnot. But this is suspending all of those enforcement actions for the duration of the emergency. With regard to B&O tax, the resolution defers first quarter B&O tax payments, which are due at the end of April. I believe it's the 31st of April, delaying that until the second quarter, which is then be due on July 31st. Depending on the length of this emergency, if we're still sitting here in June, council, then we would raise it to your attention. You could take a separate action to further delay it if you want. Yes, Councilmember Greenstein.
So deferring it to July 31st, they would have their first and second quarter due at the same time,
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I guess it gives them the option to defer.
Right.
Correct. Oh, they still pay it, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not required right now.
Right, and there'll be no penalties or anything if they
That's-
wait.
that's-
That's the idea.
that's correct.
Okay.
We had a vibrant discussion last week about the paper bag fee. And so the resolution does suspend the requirement of the 5-cent pass-through charge for each, the language used in the LMC is for each recyclable paper carry-out bag provided to customers. And then finally, the resolution, we did not talk about this last week, but staff, we talked about it on a staff level. And there are businesses struggling with this new business model now, getting the word out that they're open, getting the word out that they're delivering now. Maybe they didn't before. So there's some means of alerting the public that they want to take advantage of that are precluded by our sign code as it exists. So the resolution proposes some changes to our sandwich boards, and Rick can certainly talk about this more, but it also gives the Community and Economic Development Director authority to take any action that he sees fit in his discretion to assist businesses in advertising about their business. And then the final section of the resolution simply states the effectiveness of it, and it's effective immediately upon council passing it, and then it's going to remain in effect up through and until the end of the emergency that was declared by this council last week. So with that, I would recommend that the council approve the resolution providing temporary procedures in response to the impacts of COVID-19.
I move that we pass this resolution as stated.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this resolution providing temporary procedures in response to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're into discussion. Councilmember Greenstein.
Yeah, I just want to bring up one thing. I mentioned it to a couple of you before the meeting, but we received an email from, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, but everyone should have received the email. It was from the, I'm sorry? Yeah, regarding the grocery stores asking if we could also, for this same duration, waive, I'm sorry? Yeah, thank you, Catherine Holm. Also waive the restriction on plastic bags for the same period. They're running into a problem of running out of paper bags, and obviously they don't want people bringing their own bags at this time because of the virus. So I'd like to see where council feels about that. And again, it would only be for the same duration that we're
Deputy
passing
Mayor?
this resolution.
Well, I have a couple questions, and it's around what Councilmember Greenstein said as well, but this states that it's, where I lost my point, it suspends the requirement, but that doesn't mean they can't do it, right? They could
Correct.
still charge, it just says we're not forcing them to charge it.
Correct.
And then secondly, I thought everyone except the mayor was going, based on this and other things that were not supposed to be coming in, we were supposed to be all doing this virtual. So I'm sort of surprised. Okay, those two things.
Yeah, so those are two different issues.
Yes.
And going forward, we'll talk about how we're going to conduct meetings going forward. I think from here on out, everyone will be using Zoom. I might be here as the one representative, but I think everyone else is going to be using Zoom going forward. So hopefully that answers that question for you, Deputy Mayor. This question about the grocery stores.
Required.
Yeah, I'm tending to agree with Councilmember Greenstein on this. If we're not allowing them to bring in their bag and they're running out of their other bag, I don't know, we're putting them in a very awkward position. I'm hoping this doesn't last very long. I mean, we're all hoping this is only going to be, a month or.
Shorter the better.
The shorter the better. And so.
But isn't that true, that they could charge, they're just not required to charge, but they could charge if they wanted to?
Yeah, that doesn't, the question is they're running out of their paper bags. And so.
Right.
And so they don't have a bag. If that's, under our ordinance, they can't produce any other bag but the paper bag. And so that's the question here. Councilmember Stedman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it would be like the paper towels. Maybe they would restrict customers to, but I would be more comfortable with the actual company determining that, whether it's Safeway or Winco. But they might limit customers to 4 bags at the most. So you might want to prioritize what you go to purchase when you go to the store.
Yeah.
Or use home delivery.
Understand. Councilmember Kunkel?
So, going away from the plastic bag issue, we have several emails the council received from concerned members in the community. If we are going to essentially ban the public from being present for council meetings, should we not have planned to address some of these emails? I mean, what other way are the public can be able to communicate with us if they can't be present? Then it's either going to be by email or snail mail
Or phone call.
or phone call. So if we're going to keep the public out, as a practice, we need to be more forthcoming with these emails and allow the council to discuss the topics that the public are bringing to our attention. And we haven't done that today, with the exception of the paper bag.
Yeah. Mr. City Manager, do you have a suggestion on how we're going to all stay in communication and be able to address our constituents' concerns as they come in other ways?
So we'll be looking at some ways of how other cities have been doing this up north. We were, again, kind of preparing that we would be open one more time for the public until the governor's order actually prohibited in public physical presence in our council deliberations. And so we will figure out a better mechanism so the public has a better opportunity to provide input, at least prior to, for your consideration.
I know right now we're using technology, but we also Facebook live stream this and do it in some other. Is there ability to ask questions or have a period at the beginning to take questions from the public that way?
I mean, there obviously is, but you're limited to that one channel of Facebook. If someone's on Facebook, then those folks that still want to have some opportunity to engage. I've seen some cities do kind of a conference call type situation, but that gets a little bit difficult, in terms of calling in and trying to manage that sort of public input. Mm-hmm. But we could look at some other ways that makes it a little bit more seamless.
Couldn't we read the income? I mean, we could read into the record questions that come in writing, whether it be email or snail mail or whatever, and address them that way, perhaps.
Yeah, I think, and that's since there's we're redoing this agenda, it could be under other business, and that's what I'm hoping we can use that other business section to bring up ongoing concerns, right? Maybe it's a email we received from a constituent that has a big concern about what's happening, and under other business, we can bring it up there. The other thing is we won't be doing boards, commissions, and committee reports, but if there's something that has happened in one of your committees that you really believe you need to get that information out to the public, I think that's the other time under the other business. Let's use it judiciously, but I think that will give us the opportunity to address some of these issues. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Deputy Mayor.
So I'm not sure why everyone is jumping on Zoom, but there's GoToMeeting, there's WebEx, there's Blue Jeans that all allow us to people to comment and yet have face-to-face time as well as slides and stuff. So I'm surprised everyone's now all of a sudden going to Zoom, but there's other opportunities, including Skype, I believe, but anyway.
That's true. So there's a motion and a second. We've had some discussion. Is there, yeah.
I'm just wondering, we didn't get to any
We didn't-
resolution on
we
the
didn't-
question that I
We didn't get
asked.
to any
but-
resolution. That's where I'm getting to. Where is the council at about the temporary suspension of our bag ban policy?
Okay, so if, I was in King County earlier this week, and you know, they let the market set the price. So some stores is 10 cents, some stores is 5 cents, some stores is 3 cents, depending on what store you go to. And it's right now, it's a lot of the stores don't have any paper bags. They just have the plastic bags. So if we limit it to paper bags, what are we saying? We're saying, you know, you can charge for paper bags, but you can't charge for paper bags, but you can charge for plastic bags. Is that?
We're not saying you can't charge for paper bags either. We're saying you don't have,
You
the
don't have
current ordinance requires a nickel charge on the paper bag. What we're saying temporarily is it's completely up to the, I mean, they can still charge for the bag if they wish to. We're just not forcing them to during this emergency.
Right, so we're
At
saying
current.
you don't have to charge for paper bags.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, what about plastic bags?
That's the question that we have, is do we want to suspend our bag ban policy, our plastic bag policy temporarily
Yeah.
or not? Council,
Yes.
well, Councilmember Stedman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's, my same concern is like the last resolution. Would companies purposely not order enough? If they can't get them or they're not available, then we shouldn't be enforcing. But if they can get them and choose not to order them or whatever, just to not have them to have an avenue to get plastic, then that's not good. That's my comment.
It's only for the very
Yeah.
short term.
What about
though.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor?
So, I don't understand why they don't have enough. You order them in bulk and you can store them. So they have always had them. So they're not ordering them 10 at a time now. They're ordering them still in bulk. And I'm rather surprised they don't have enough. But given that, if we could write into the resolution and be clear that we would suspend that, but as soon as the emergency is over, they must go back to the plastic bag ban. I'd be comfortable with it.
Councilmember Cox?
I tend to agree with that, and I'm a little worried. I think, you know, if we try to get too prescriptive with this, then we sort of defeat the purpose of doing it. So, yeah, I think we need to let the stores do what they need to do to get through this.
Yeah. Councilmember Kunkel?
Well, answer to Deputy Mayor's question, the reason they're running out is because people are not allowed to bring in their own bags anymore, given this current crisis. So
They're going through a lot more.
the demand for paper bags has skyrocketed in the last few weeks. So now they're trying to compensate for it by ordering more. But that's the reason why. It's not some kind of ulterior motive. They're not accustomed to seeing these many paper bags being taken from the stores. So that's the reason why.
So then, under this, under the resolution providing temporary procedures in response to the impacts of COVID-19, under the pass-through charge for paper bags, I would say that we will temporarily suspend our plastic bag ban until the end of this emergency until
So
this resolution.
the title, the chapter is 8.06 of the Lacey Municipal Code.
Okay.
To achieve what the council's discussing, the amendment would be to just, yes, suspend the requirements of chapter 8.06. That would take care of it.
Would you need a separate
So
motion?
there's a
or can
motion
it
on the
be-
table, so there needs to be a motion to amend the motion.
So I would move to amend the current motion to include a suspension of 8.06 until the end of this emergency.
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay. It's been moved and second. We're going to vote on this first.
On the
Vote on the
amendment.
amendment first, right?
Amendment first.
Yes.
All in favor of the amendment, say aye, and I'll go in order. Deputy Mayor Pratt,
Aye.
Councilmember Stedman,
I
Councilmember Cox.
abstain.
You're abstained. Councilmember Cox,
Aye.
Councilmember Greenstein,
Aye.
Councilmember Miller,
Aye.
Councilmember Kunkel.
Aye.
The ayes have it. And then next up is the motion to approve the rest of the resolutions providing temporary procedures in response to the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic
As amended.
as amended. All in favor of that motion, we'll go roll call again. Deputy Mayor Pratt,
Aye.
Councilmember Stedman,
Aye.
Councilmember Cox,
Aye.
Councilmember Greenstein,
Aye.
Councilmember Miller,
Aye.
Councilmember Kunkel.
Aye.
And the ayes have it. And that's the end of that motion. That motion passes. Next up is COVID-19 update. Mr. City Manager.
So, actually, I was hoping we could talk about this related to this. So we wanted to talk. We wanted to talk
Can't
about a United Way request. So as we've talked about helping out the small business community, there's also been concern about the most vulnerable in our community also. So I've passed out an email to council and also emailed. So Chris Wells, the director of Thurston County United Way, is hoping that the city would actually add $50,000 into an emergency fund program, given the context of COVID-19. Just briefly, I'll highlight what they're wanting to use the funds for. This does not add up to $50,000 because they're actually trying to do a larger fund, but the focus is Senior Services of South Sound. What they're seeing is a doubling of Meals on Wheels delivery from 700 to 1,400 in the last 48 hours. This was submitted to us last week.
So it's probably
I'm-
greater than that now then?
It could be,
Perhaps.
but that's the number they're using. So I'm sorry, earlier this week it was submitted to us. So $16,000 would be invested in that program. Nurse Family Partnership Program, they're looking to do a $15,000 to $20,000 investment. This would be for making bulk purchases for emergency supplies for infants, including diapers, wipes, infant formula, and baby food. Again, they're also seeing large numbers of just demand for those type of items. Community Action Council, as you well know, is a partner with the City of Lacey. They provide relief for families and individuals who can't make rent or utility payments. They're looking to provide $50,000 for basic emergency needs. Catholic Community Services are looking to add $12,500 to expand daily meal services for homeless and people who are food insecure. And then Interfaith Works, they're looking to provide $7,500 for hygiene and sanitation supplies for those that are homeless. And so a similar request was made to the City of Olympia, actually $50,000. I believe they've approved that investment. I spoke with the county manager in Thurston County. They asked for, I believe, $150,000. They ultimately decided to give them $75,000. My assumption is similar requests have been made to other governments like Tumwater.
So I know we have several different reserves that we could take this from. Which reserve would you suggest us taking this $50,000?
So we still in the budget have a social service account. That's something that we had set up for the current budget. Those funds actually have not been expended. You may recall too, we had $50,000 for Salvation Army. That's a carryover. That was not also expended. So those would be the funds I'd be suggesting that we'd use for this purpose if council wanted to pursue this.
Can I get a motion? Then I will make the motion to approve the $50,000 to the United Way in response to COVID-19.
Second.
And Councilmember Stedman seconded it? There you go, buddy.
Electronic.
Discussion. Is there any
Got in
discussion?
there.
So, quick question. if we do this for 50,000, and we were thinking about giving more money to Salvation Army so they'll have more beds, does that remove the ability to do that?
I don't think it removes the council's flexibility in doing that, but granted, I mean, the council and our budget can only handle so many requests. It's something that council needs to consider in terms of how they want to respond to this current issue.
Yeah, I think we have a couple different reserves that I think is available, Deputy Mayor. And I think this is a good use of those funds, you know, especially the Salvation Army funds that are just sitting there. I would love for Salvation Army to open up more beds, but that's just out of our control at the moment. So in the meantime, I think we should be helping our community as much as possible during this time. Councilmember Stedman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because the Community Action Council was brought up, I just wanted to let the city manager know and council know that the board feels that they're essential business or entity that should be recognized as essential. That's it.
Is there any other discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, I'll start with Deputy Mayor Pratt.
Aye.
Councilmember Stedman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cox.
Aye.
Councilmember Greenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Miller.
Aye.
And Councilmember Kunkel.
Aye.
And the ayes have it. The motion passes. So next up is that,
Yeah, I guess I may have skipped ahead, so that was
yeah,
my-
you
that was
skipped
my
ahead to
fault.
the Thurston County
I
United Way
apologize.
request.
I
Next
would
up is
for
the
the record
normal-
note that you have more confidence in Rick since you gave him discretion on the signage.
Well, you know what, we never did get to talk about the signage, because I had a question about the signage. And so are you saying, Rick, that we're going to be helping out local businesses with signage so that they can say, hey, we are doing takeout?
We're relaxing, or we're temporarily suspending some rules. So for example, a sandwich board sign has to be within 12 feet of the door of the business. We're going to say, hey, you can put that up by the street, you can make it so, because you're having to have a shift of business from walk-in to takeout and carry-out.
Sure.
Another, we have limitations on the amount of banners or special display events, so many times through the year for a certain period of time. If they want to put a banner up on their storefront, say, hey, we're open and we're doing takeout, carry, it's provide them that type of relief because they're having to do a shift in service and try to keep awareness out to the public of what they're offering.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Great. And now to the rest of the COVID-19 update.
So just a couple comments on the COVID-19. As you know, there really is no playbook on how you respond to a pandemic of really the scope and size.
I thought you had it all figured out.
Well, I think as you watch around what's going on really here locally, the state, the country, and the world, these are uncertain times to say the least. But I will tell you, we've talked a lot about, essential services, but I would like to at least kind of thank really the city employees actually responding really to this pandemic, COVID-19. It's been really an extraordinary kind of watch the organization react to this. And I wouldn't mention the fact that we talk a lot about essential, but I'd argue that really, as the city of Lacey, it sort of reminds everyone how critical local government is to try to keep things in order. Police, public safety, obviously, our utility workers, our permit counter, and really everyone within the city of Lacey trying to make sure that we're providing services and also still trying to react to the public in maybe a different fashion, but we're trying to do that as we sort of work through this new sort of stay home, stay healthy sort of declaration by the governor. One thing I will tell you that we've really transitioned, I'd like to focus on the fact that I know we've talked a lot about essential and non-essential. Again, I'd argue that really all of our employees, the 280 employees that we have, are critical to serving the community. And what we've done is really tried to figure out who needs to be off-site and who needs to be on-site. And so that's the posture we're trying to do in serving the community and trying to make sure all those critical programs and services are being maintained, as well as the continuity of government is being maintained. So that really is our focus right now. And now that we're really kind of in day one of the governor's order of basically stay home, stay healthy, I think we'll start to kind of figure out a different sort of rhythm in terms of how we do and respond to what's going on in the public. And I do hope the public has patience as we kind of work through all these issues. I think we want to make sure that everyone stays safe. I want to think we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that COVID is minimized here locally as well as the state. And then we'll continue to focus on that. And again, we'll kind of revisit this in another 2 weeks and see where we're at, and hopefully we're in a better position than we are today. So that's really the report I have on COVID. I just have one other thing on other business, but if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to ask those.
But your other business?
So this seems inconsequential when we're talking about COVID-19, but as per our interlocal agreement policy, read any interlocal agreement that I've signed that meets the 25,000 under threshold. So there was an extension to our rideshare companies, which is basically Uber, Lyft, et cetera. That agreement came to an end. So what I did, we extended that. So that's going to last until 2025 of January. So again, that's the ride-sharing companies. We also signed an interlocal agreement related to our SWAT deployment, which really provides the framework for Thurston County, as well as Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Yelm to basically perform in a SWAT type of arrangement if we need a police emergency. So that replaces an agreement that was made in 2011. That's an ongoing agreement unless it's actually terminated. And then just the final thing is we have another agreement with Thurston County, who does our infrastructure for our cars and technology. We actually give that to the sheriff's office, and we pay a flat fee of $250 per user. So that was also signed prior to COVID-19.
Well, we've reached the end of this agenda. Councilmember Stedman?
So I just wanted to say that I've been watching Facebook online, and it got up to 39 viewers, the highest I've seen it. But trying to pay attention to everything else at the same time, there's a lot of comments and questions and discussion that were part of while we were going through our discussion and vote and stuff. I don't know what the policies and procedures are with that. You know, it's so. I just want to make sure that the viewers, they're going to get their concerns and questions addressed.
You know, I hope that the public can bear with us, right, during this very difficult time. First of all, I want to say how proud I am of the Lacey family and our residents, our businesses, the staff here, our elected officials. I mean, from day one, when we realized where this was going, it's been all hands on deck. And we've done everything we can to protect our citizens to the best of our ability. The fact that we are in a position to be helping our small businesses because we've been so fiscally prudent for the past decade, or as long as I can ever remember, is a huge testament to the city of Lacey. Our city, our size, with the tax revenues that we have, are able to do something that will hopefully save people's livelihoods. And I'm just so proud that we've been able to come together and as quickly as we did, put together that program, to put other measures in place to protect our citizens and to help our citizens, the ongoing communication that we're having, the regular communication saying, here's the resources, we're here to answer any questions, we have your back. I think that is so important for our community to know and to be proud of. This is why we're one of the best cities to live in the United States. And so Money Magazine definitely got it right. And I just want to thank everyone for their part. And just to make sure that we care about each other right now, that we're patient with each other. When you're scared, like everyone is right now, including myself as the mayor, it's hard to make good rational decisions when you're scared. And so you just need to find that place where you can take a deep breath and realize what's really important in life. And it's each other, right? That's what makes Lacey special. It's the people and the businesses who are located here. And that's ultimately why we're all doing this. That's why everyone here on this council put their name forward to try to represent this great city. And I'm just so proud of everyone our entire council, our staff, and our community. And so for the community that's listening, please be patient. We will try to get to your concerns, and we'll try to answer them as soon as possible. I know you're scared, but we will get through this together. And with that, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And as always, you keep it classy, Lacey, and you stay safe. Call this meeting adjourned.